Hi, I'm David Abrams, and I want to welcome you to this edition of the Tenant Experience Network podcast. I want to welcome today's guest, Matt Knight, founder of PropTech Angel Group and investor in early-stage technology for commercial buildings. In this episode, we will learn about Matt's journey to his current role as investor and board member, where he combines his learning from early days in private equity to becoming a PropTech nerd. We will tap into his thinking around how tech will get us back to the workplace as one of his keys to success, and get a glimpse into what is top of mind for Matt as he continues to navigate through new challenges and emerging opportunities. We're excited to be sharing this podcast with you, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Tenant Experience Network. Now I'd like to welcome Matt to the show. Hey, Matt, really glad you could be with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So to sort of kick things off, I'd love to get a better understanding of your journey to your current role as, I hope I got this right, founder, investor, board member. There might be a few other titles that I saw along the way, but I'm just wondering how you got started, and if you can just walk us through that process.
Yeah, sure. I came from the private equity real estate world. I worked for a company called Colony Capital, which is now Colony North Star, and I managed a few $100 million of real estate for them in the last recession. And I left in 2013 to start my own thing. I started an investing firm with a partner, and that was a lot of fun, but I pretty quickly realized I needed a way to differentiate what I did. There were a lot of people with more money and experience, a better golf game than I had, and so I had to decide, why would Mr. Broker call me? And so my answer was just, I'm going to use tech. I could open my computer, and most guys that I competed against could not. And so I just became this PropTech nerd in 2013. When PropTech wasn't a thing, you were just called a nerd. There was no such thing as a PropTech nerd. You were just a nerd. And so that was me. Eventually turned it into a venture fund, which I started with a partner. And we built that up. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of strategic investors. We built an incubator with WeWork. We did an accelerator. I had a lot of fun as a micro VC, kind of small early check seed round. And then ended up leaving early last year. And ever since then, I've been out doing some angel investing with some of my favorite investors, which is a lot of fun. Do a little bit of consulting, as you said, trying to help my portfolio companies any way that I can, and figuring out what I'm going to be when I grow up, which is, maybe just an angel investor. I don't know. If they don't make me grow up, I probably won't. So that's where I am right now.
Well, first of all, it's not a bad profession. I know a number of people that have done quite well, and certainly is exciting, never a dull moment. So interestingly, we both have 2013 in common. That is actually the year that I wrote the strategy document for what ultimately became Hilo and the platform that I built and founded. And I agree with you, in 2013, PropTech certainly did not exist as a term. And when I went out to sort of share my idea with people within the industry, they looked at me like I was from outer space. Thank goodness that's all changed. But that was the year. So
we know tech. We have Excel. We use Argus. We're tech forward. I know what you're saying.
Right. So why do you think you were so uniquely suited to this opportunity? Any unique skills that have helped you to become successful in sort of this path you followed?
Is desperation a skill? Does that count? Like I just trying to find, scrambling to find a way to win deals. It's tough to say because it's such an amalgamation of all the things you learn along the way, and just there's so many amazing people in the space that I've learned a lot from the venture world. I've learned a lot from the CRE world. I've learned a lot from angel investors and my partners. So I don't know that there's any skill that I have. I just kind of dumb luck found a lot of really smart people that would speak when I'm around, and I just kind of be scribbling, oh yes, and say that again. I had a lot of very bright people around me, which has been very fortunate.
Well, we'll talk about influences in your life a little bit later on. So you let the cat out of the bag on that one, but that's okay. You said desperation. I think, so maybe desperation is more a state of mind, maybe more determination is the unique skill. Combination thereof, I guess, right?
It's funny. Determination is one of those weird things where it's very much glorified in the startup world, but there's also a point of belligerent determination where it's you're square peg in a round hole, man. So it's one of there's a correct amount of determination, right? It's
right.
You are forcing a solution where there is not a problem. And so I think it gets a little over glorified in the startup space. It's like, oh, keep hustling, 3 a.m. Yeah, go get them. And it's like, are you sure you got product market fit? Like this should be a little easier than that. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. It should be hard, but not quite that hard.
Well, as a founder, it is hard to realize it probably that maybe it's not going to work because it's just inbred within us that, we see the finish line, right? Pretty hard to let that go, I would imagine. So far, I'm sticking with it. Any advice for someone wanting to follow a similar path?
Ironically, it is just stay determined. It's just most people won't understand it, and so they won't. They'll. Most people aren't overtly mean. They just kind of subtly are like, okay, good luck with that, or they just kind of dismiss you off. And like, if you're not stupid, you understand what they're saying. Is like that's not going to work, right? So no one says that to you, but they kind of imply it with, "How's your thing going?" Right? They can't even tell you what you do. I'm sure you know that as a startup founder. It's like, how's your app? Like they just say it with disdain in their voice. And so again, there is this like resiliency about like ignore them, right? There's 9 out of 10 are that person, and it's okay. They're not bad. They just don't understand. And so that's kind of the fun thing about being in PropTech now is there's enough of us now that do get it, and we will support you and we'll cheer you on and be like, yeah, you're doing something worthwhile. Keep with it. So mine is kind of stick with it, but find a crew that will support you and understands what you're trying to do.
Right. So just a little bit off script in terms of prop tech and how it's emerged. What do you think of the current prop tech space and the amount of activity, the amount of attention? Just any thoughts, given that, as we both pointed out in 2013, when we sort of recognized an opportunity, it really didn't exist at that time?
Well, what's interesting in recording this in late summer 2020 is that answer is different now than it might have been 8 months ago.
Right.
Because like an office, a space that you and I know, it's a year ago, people would have said, let's keep up with WeWork and their design. We got to have creative office space. We got to think flexible. And now it's like, when someone asks me about the design of their office, I like laugh at them. I'm like, if you can't keep me healthy, I'm not coming back no matter what it looks like, right? Don't tell me how cheap the lease is or how sexy the lobby. I don't care you have a Peloton. Like, I'm not walking in that building until you tell me there is touchless access, there's occupancy sensors, there's incredibly high quality air quality monitors. Like that's what matters. And so PropTech is having this almost tragic moment in the sun now where it's like, tech is what's getting me back to your office building and your retail center and making me stay sane in my apartment. Like, this is a tech problem, not a finance problem, not a location problem, not the typical real estate stuff. It is a tech problem. And so I think it's having this, like I said, strangely fortuitous, and I don't want to be callous to the devastation that COVID-19 has caused because it's been terrible, but it's forced some people to stop what they were doing and think about, how can I add tech to my portfolio? Right. So it's wildly more relevant now than it ever has been. And so I think a lot of the trends that were happening are just happening faster, and a lot of the early adopters and early majority are really, really paying attention. Even some of the late majority, if you kind of buy into the diffusion of innovation curve, are starting to have to pay attention to this, right? The laggards still have their flip phones and they're retired and they don't care. But everybody else is saying, all right, we need to reassess this. So I think it's a strangely extraordinary time right now.
Yeah, I agree. It was hard for me to get into the mindset as to try to look for the silver lining of COVID because I just felt it was awful. And I'm generally not the type to sort of take a bad situation and try to find what's good in it. But I do agree. I think obviously a lot has accelerated now as a result of this. And, when we look at our platform, we really believe it's moved, from a vitamin to an aspirin where there's a lot more need. And given that tech is going to be so critical to people coming back to the workplace, and the definition of workplace has changed so dramatically, it really is now work from everywhere. And we believe that our platform, particularly not being just a building app, but being more of a network, is going to help bridge that divide, that gap, and provide a really interesting solution. So I'm with you there. What's the biggest challenge you're experiencing right now, and how do you think you'll overcome it?
Biggest challenge right now is I have more deals that I like than I have time to fund them, right? The problem with being an angel group is there is no analyst, there is no associate. It's just me and a bunch of part-timers
Right.
trying to put capital into deals, and I got to do a formal diligence and open bank accounts and form an LLC, like that, all that stuff. I have very limited bandwidth. And so I have probably three deals that within a fund context, I would be deeply interested in funding, and I can probably only do one of them because I only have time for one. So my issue is time constraints, not opportunities.
So that's really interesting. So I guess to that end, what if there's the three that you'd perhaps do, but the one you choose to do, what's creating that standout? What's helping that one to jump above the other two?
Part of the way to think about this is if you're going to be a thoughtful investor, you have to be a mix of reactive and proactive. Like we all have decks that come across our desk that we react to and say, that's a clever play and that's a need. But there's also proactive. And so you have your theses that you pursue and say, I think the future of work is going to look like this. And I think there's a few tech solutions that solve for that. And so I go look for those solutions in those companies. And so I would tell you the ones that most align with my admittedly arbitrary and subjective view on these theses are the ones that I give priority to, right? And then when I feed them through my group and through my advisors and say, is this a real problem? Is this compelling? Would you pay for it? How much would you pay? I ask my diligence questions and I get a lot of vehemently positive feedback. Now I know I'm onto something, right? And so it's actually a built-in mechanism into the group as I have people looking at deals with me almost every day. And so when I hear people say, wait a minute, they're doing what? Like, can I, I have founders saying, I'll give you some money for that because that's amazing, right? That's when I know I'm onto something from these guys that really know the space.
So you've got that real world filter embedded in your process, right?
Because they have nothing to gain or lose from telling me that, right? It's not their company. They're not pitching me on anything. They're like, I'm in these meetings with these landlords and I'm telling you that what these guys are doing is remarkable. And so some of my best inbound leads come from my angels that are founders of PropTech companies that say, I'm putting 10 grand into this company. Do you want to do it with me?
Right.
That's a very strong referral.
Absolutely. If you had an extra $100,000 of budget right now, how would you spend it and why?
On an analyst. I just pay an analyst, right? Like just someone to do diligence and put together investment memos for me. Like it just takes way too much of my time.
Right. All right. Well, I'll see what I can do on the 100K. If not, I'll send you my resume. Are there any resources? So we talked a little bit about this in your opening comments, but any resources, mentors, colleagues, books that have really helped you along your journey?
Warren Buffett has a quote about this or maybe it was Charlie Munger. He talks about what's your favorite investing book? And it's like, I've read 200, so I love Ben Horowitz's book, but I just read a book by Andy Duke about thinking in bets that was great. And I'm doing one now on essentialism that's really good. And I just finished one on the courage to be disliked. So, again, there are 50 books, Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham from the 20s, right? And then Ray Dalio's Principles was really interesting to me, right? And then, again, there's 50 books, 20 podcasts, 5,000 conversations. Like it's an agglomeration of collective knowledge, not like one thing. So I do underwrite and write articles on a few books that really stand out, but I take pieces I like from each of them and apply them to my thesis and my stage in this century and, whatever the current situation is.
Right. Interesting. Can you share any details about anything new you're working on, something that you think our listeners might find interesting?
It's funny thinking about the angel group is angel groups are fairly, they're kind of all over the place. Most people don't even know what that means, an angel group. And so what I've started learning about our group is that we are as much just a community as we are a club of investors. Is I don't really care how many deals we do. Like if we do 2, but we love them and people love it, I'm very happy with that, right? Versus the first question investors is, how many deals do you do? Like I don't really care, right? And so what I'm working on is a lot of tools for engagement with our group. And so partnerships with people like Superpower that allow us to do paid mentorship for our members. I'm working on some cool internal tools. Obviously, we're growing our Slack community and kind of how people can trade deals and data and leads and partnerships. So everything I'm working on the group side is about just facilitating that community and preventing myself from being the bottleneck. Everybody has to go through Matt because I'm not interested in that. I want you guys to do remarkable things without me, and I just provide the forum.
Right. How competitive is the angel world right now in terms of the network and the group that you're building? Is it easy to access and find those that are interested and able to invest in the kind of projects you're working on? Is this a competitive environment? Share any details on that?
So in terms of finding the actual investors or finding deals?
The investors.
I wouldn't say investors are terribly hard to find because I'm an investor, so we're kind of brethren, I suppose. Um, but I would tell you, unlocking what matters to them and how to get them to show up and engage, there's just some nuance in that. There's some art to that beyond just the science. Because a lot of people say, I don't need an angel group. I'm the greatest angel that's ever walked the earth in Boston, right? I don't need your help. Okay, right? Or, hey, I'm too busy running my company. I'm going to do deals as I like to do them. I don't have time. Okay, no big deal, right? Like, so I don't ever try and force anybody or sell anybody on this. It's got to be something that really fits with your goals and lifestyles and financial goals. But I think that's where more like the actual intro and the meeting of the people is not terribly challenging. The actual getting them to be engaged, which is probably something worth mentioning, is the only thing I really ask from my members is be engaged and respect the other members. Because if you don't do either of those two, we're going to have a problem. I don't care how many checks you write. I don't care your net worth. If you're engaged, you're going to help my portfolio and our portfolio companies, right? If you respect the other members, you're not going to be spamming people with, let me introduce you to my wealth management guy. Here's some insurance. Like that's not okay. But otherwise, I don't have a lot of rules. If I need to give you rules, you're not a good fit for the group anyway.
Right. Okay. If you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
My superpower would be like the gift to sway other people's minds into things. Like if I could convince you, if I could just wave my fingers and the entire world thought that you are okay the way you are. I think that's solved about 80% of the world's problems, right? Like if I could just get rid of that ego chasing and the like, you got to be better and you got to keep up with that guy and you don't look good enough and you're not smart enough, you don't have enough money. Like if I could just get rid of that, I think that would be a superpower I'd want. Just everybody chill the F out, be okay with who you are, be a little more comfortable in your skin, way less drama. So that would be my superpower, is just like changing people's psyche a little bit.
I love it. Maybe a little more tolerant, a little more patient.
Yep. Yep.
I love it. All right. Well, there's something there for sure. So listen, these are certainly unexpected times and lots of complexity in the world. What are you really curious about right now? Is there anything that has you thinking differently in light of current circumstances?
Differently in light of the COVID or in kind of where we are in the cycle or all of the above?
All of the above.
I think we're at an interesting time PropTech's kind of obvious, but I think there's also this interesting time in venture capital right now that I am trying to study and understand, because venture capital got extraordinarily crowded over the last 10 years. And so what does that mean in terms of strategy, deal flow, execution, operations, recruiting, all that stuff? That's a very interesting question. And so when do you expand overseas? When do you do deals outside of your home country? When do you lead around? When do you co-invest, right? Those questions to me have changed over the last 10 years and are going to continue to change. How long are companies staying private? Are SoftBank and Fidelity and Welding going to keep people staying private for 12 years on average, which used to be 4 years, right, in the 80s? And so is that pendulum swinging back? And so to me, I think what I'm curious about now is, what does venture capital look like in 2025 or 2030? And how do those funding trends flow back down? Because in our space, right, WeWork tried to go public and they're not a tech company, but they got confused with tech companies. So people said, oh, PropTech, WeWork, yeah, I know them. So right or wrong, the public seems to think that's PropTech company, right? When they didn't, what did we learn from that? That's an interesting question. How does that flow down to early stage investing? That's a pretty interesting question to examine.
Yeah, well, I think on that front, it's just really too bad that they were considered a prop tech company or a technology company, pretty much all along until that moment in time.
Well, you say that, but if Industrious goes public and they kill it, then we might be, yeah, all right, well, go get them, Industrious. They kind of do the same thing. They're a co-working management company, right?
Right.
VTS will be really interesting. Airbnb is imminent. They're going to be interesting. Procore is going to be interesting. I mean, there's a lot coming up that could, I don't want to say sweep that under the rug, but sort of change public perception slightly, or at least alter it mildly. So I think the next 12 months will be interesting to watch the public markets and what PropTech is viewed as.
Right. We spoke earlier about returning to workplace, and you definitely had some thoughts. For you, it's all around health, safety, well-being. None of us can make predictions as to what that's going to look like. Any thoughts in general around what you're seeing? Friends, family, colleagues around returning to the workplace. Industry professionals. What do you think it's going to take? How long do you think it's going to take?
I would tell you, I'm sure like you do, I read a lot of articles on this because it's relevant to my day job.
Yep.
And so there's the camp of like Facebook and, Shopify, we're never coming back in the office ever again, right? And then there's the get back in the office as soon as possible. No productivity happens outside of these four walls, right? And I think like most people, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think many companies are being thoughtful. And what I'm grateful for is people are asking these questions about why do we have meetings? Why do you drive that far to work? And which meetings are really necessary in person, right? Like those questions should have been asked a while ago, right? If you were a thoughtful founder, you probably did. And there's a lot of companies that have been remote or distributed or partial, very flexible on telecommute options. So this is not new to, let's say, 10% of the companies, right? But for the other 90 that really had to self-examine, I'm fascinated to see where they come out, because I do buy that we're not all going back to 5 days a week, 9 hours a day in the office, driving long commutes. Like, I think that time of 100% of that is over. I think that is over, right? But again, no one's ever back in the office, nonsense, right? Like, we all need some interaction. We need some in-person meetings. There's some whiteboarding. There's some things that have to happen, some jobs that have to be done in person. So I don't know where that works out. Some stats I've seen is 25 to 40% of the workforce survey, this was out of a DC survey, are going to have some sort of remote or telecommute options going forward permanently. I think that's even low. I think it may be 60, 70%. It could be 80%. That wouldn't surprise me at all, because I hear it from Fortune 500 companies that are as old and as stodgy as you can get, and they're like, this has been pretty good. Like, we're still, look at our revenue, we're still doing fine.
Yeah, I think I think the number of companies that will accommodate a flexible work schedule is going to be much higher. The extent to which people actually work from home or remote or from anywhere, I think is going to really vary. Because I do really believe the companies that made those grand statements very early on, we're going to be a virtually remote company forever and a day, I think they're going to regret that comment, that decision. And I think their workforce, when given an opportunity to work at other companies that have found ways to bring people back together and have those moments of creativity and spontaneity and collaboration, that's going to be pretty enticing, because I can tell you that my team, small but mighty, we've made it work, but it's not easy. It's not easy working remotely and not together in any way, for a long period of time. So I look forward to, and of course, we're very focused on being part of that solution and helping buildings and businesses find ways to, ultimately come back together and, to your point, make them feel safe and secure, and also recognize that, the building community now stretches way beyond the four walls of any building.
And I think what's interesting about it is this thing that started happening in retail 10 or 15 years ago, maybe more, around placemaking, is just, it's a place where you come and do more than one thing, right? You're not just shopping at the shopping center, you're going to the spa and you're getting groceries, and you're doing a lot of different things. Maybe you get your nails done. I mean, whatever it is, like, Topgolf was good at this, where you would stay at Topgolf for 4 or 5 hours and be like, oh my God, I've been here for 5 hours, right? You didn't even know it because it was such an enjoyable experience. So I think there's going to be this pendulum swing, or maybe just this accelerating trend on, you really have to have a reason to stay for multiple hours. And a lot of the thoughtful landlords, I think, are thinking strategically about that.
Right. Yep. It's going to be very exciting to see what unfolds, what comes next. Anything you wish you had known when you first started out?
I think I wish I had known that that tech wasn't the problem. And I'm going to say that again.
Okay.
Because my son just opened the door.
That's all right.
Right when I started this, it was like, hey, if only we had the tech, we would solve the problem. And what I've realized is the tech already exists, right? We just need to put it in packages that are usable for landlords and owners and tenants and managers, right? So it's like computer vision and blockchain, like we're not waiting on some new invention. We're looking more at use cases. So you know what I mean? Like we're not waiting on a tech innovation, we're waiting for the right application in our space. And I had thought there was more technological challenge, and that really has not been my experience.
Right. So just continuation from that, and I guess maybe a prediction in my last question. Do you think now that we talked about technology being so critical to forming part of the solution and bringing people back to the workplace, but in the mindset of the operators, the developers, the property managers, what impact do you think all of this will have on their willingness to adopt, to try, to experiment?
This being COVID in 2020 and all this stuff?
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it accelerates it. It's the problem will be, in my opinion, is they will be overwhelmed. And I think a lot of them will throw their hands up and say, there's 30 people that do this thing. How do I know which one, right? Which is part of what I get excited is like, well, call me. That's my job, right? Like, let me tell you the ones that I think are the most fundable and have the longest term prospects to them. So I don't think it's a lack of opportunity. I don't think it's a lack of desire. I think it's a lack of the skill set to know how to underwrite a tech company or a tech product. And so a lot of people don't know how to do that. They're underwriting properties and working on operations and streamlining property taxes. That's not the same as, is this computer vision company going to be around in 5 years? It's a pretty different skill set. So right. I anticipate there to be some increased appetite, but also some increased frustration around, like, I don't know, like we put an RFP out and got 900 responses. Now what do I do, right? Like it's not about availability of the tech. It's about knowing which one to choose or which 2 or 3 you should pilot with.
Right, I agree. And I think we're seeing now in companies of all sizes with more technology savvy, innovation skill sets coming, into that decision-making process to help make that evaluation. And for me as a founder and talking with this industry, what we're trying to do and really how we're positioning ourselves is really trying to be of help, not just sort of selling in and competing just as another, commoditized product, but, how can we demonstrate that we'd be a great partner and that, there's really a lot of value add and we think we can help you in your business. And I think that's also perhaps, a point of differentiation that over time will hopefully serve us well.
Partner is a good way to frame it, because you can help people, especially if you have a platform instead of a point solution. You can help people with their decisions and say, we integrate with these guys, or we know those guys, or we've done this. Like, you can give them feedback if you're a partner versus just a vendor relationship is a little less enticing, I would assume.
Agreed. Well, these are certainly challenging times. I really appreciate your taking the time to chat with us today. I look forward to continuing the conversation and hope that we can stay connected and learn a little bit more about, what's on your radar and what's working, what's not, and continuing to see where this PropTech world takes us and how ultimately, it helps commercial real estate, particularly at this moment in time.
Well, happy to do it. And I appreciate you having me on and giving me the time.
Great. Thanks very much. Bye now. I want to thank Matt Knight for joining us on today's podcast and for sharing his journey from early beginnings in private equity, managing commercial real estate, to becoming an angel investor. Great learning for all our listeners and an opportunity to gain insights into what it takes to be successful in early stage investment. Please be sure to tune in again for future discussions with leading professionals and industry experts who all have something to say about experience in the built world and the impact that technology is having on the largest asset class in the world, commercial real estate. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on a future episode, please reach out to me directly at david@hiloapp.com. And until our next episode, I wish you all continued success in building community where you work or live. Thank you.